today we're going to be doing a LinkedIn workshop, and we actually partnered with BrookSource. So Sammy is going to be leading this event, and she's this guest speaker of tonight. And before I pass it on to her, I just want to go over some quick things. Throughout the event, we're going to be sending out a Google Doc. So right now, I just sent a link in the Zoom chat if you want to open it. This is one of the ways that we're able to network with you guys and learn a little bit more about yourself. So on the left side, you can find all of our socials. If you haven't joined our Slack or Facebook, LinkedIn, you can just join it there. And that's where we pretty much let you know about all of the events that are happening every quarter and every week. And then we are also opening up for elections. So if you're interested in joining the data science committee, we would love for you to just put yes. I have a whole tab there. And that way we can reach out to you, or if you want to reach out to us, that would be great, because we are wanting to welcome everybody in. And last thing, the session is going to be recorded today. So in case you have to leave a little bit early, we're going to be sending out the YouTube link sometime next week, and then you'll be able to check it out. But aside from that, I hope you enjoyed the event. Thank you for coming. And now I'm going to pass it off to Sammy.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. For those of you I haven't met yet, thank you so much for having me. I'll be sharing my screen in just a second and going over what we will go over. But thanks so much for having me. All right, let's get started. So yes, as Raquel mentioned, we're going over LinkedIn today. But before we do that, I did want to go over who BrookSource is, just so you're familiar with us and kind of know where I'm coming from. And then, of course, I would love to stay in touch with you because I am a recruiter. So from there, we'll go over LinkedIn best practices. I would absolutely love to hear any questions, experiences you all have had on LinkedIn, or if there's anything I'm missing, I would love to hear from you about that. And then at the end, I'd love to talk about 2 positions that I currently have open that are probably might be relevant to what some of you are might be searching for in your next opportunity. All right, let's get started. So first of all, I am a recruiter, but also the program coordinator for our entry-level program at BrookSource, which I'll get into later on. I only work out of our Chicago office, but we are nationwide. So we're technically in 30 different cities. A couple of them are not named here. But if any of you on the call now are not looking for jobs in Chicago, or if you know people who are looking elsewhere, I'd be more than happy to connect you to the right person in your respective city. But for anything Chicago, I'm your person. All right, so has anyone heard of BrookSource before, or 811 Group? Maybe? Yes, no? Yes, perfect. So 811 Group's actually our company name. And then if you move our faces here on the right, you can see BrookSource is one of our divisions, and then we have 2 others that I'll cover in a second. So the 2 other divisions are like healthcare hiring and life sciences, and then calculated hire is our non-IT hiring. So BrookSource is probably most relevant to you all. It does cover most of our, or all of our data science roles, anything data related, and then anything technical. And a little backstory on us, we were originally established about 21 years ago, and originally we were established in Indianapolis. Back then, we were only focused on providing technical opportunities to college students, actually. Since then, we've expanded. We don't just do entry level. So I understand some of you on the call might not be looking for entry level roles, and we do all levels. So I'd be happy to connect you to a recruiter in our office who works on high level positions too. And now we're nationwide, like I said before. Just to backtrack, we are a staffing firm. So if I didn't make that clear, we hire for other companies. So in Chicago, these are a couple of our clients. They're mostly Fortune 500 companies. And a lot of the times they actually come to us specifically for entry-level hiring. So if any of you are on the call that are looking for entry-level roles, we do have a pretty robust program, which I'll get into in a second, that a lot of these companies listed here specifically come to us for. All right, so also, if any of you have not worked with a staffing firm before, actually, has anyone not worked with a staffing firm before on the call? You could like raise your hand or just nod. Yeah. Okay, quite a few or a couple. Okay, perfect. So I always like to point out the next slide of what I'm about to go over is really important to consider. So every staffing firm works much differently. BrookSource probably doesn't offer some things that other staffing firms do, and maybe we do. So here I'd like to point out, so we pay hourly, that's pretty typical. We pay on a weekly basis. Most of our positions are eligible for like overtime, which is something to consider compared to like salaried positions. We pay for 6 legal holidays throughout the year. So again, just something to like consider as you might be going into conversations with other staffing firms. And then after a year of working with us as a contractor, you can contribute to your 401k and start accruing additional PTO, which again, something to like maybe ask about. 85% of the time in Chicago, our contractors get converted on as full-time employees at these companies listed here, which the industry average is around like 25 or 30%. And usually when you're working with us, we do like monthly check-ins or lunches, not so much during the pandemic, obviously. And depending on if you're part of the program, we also offer like technical training and professional development. And then lastly, we do offer health benefits for our contractors. So again, I mean, for those of you that have not worked with staffing firms, I'm sure you'll probably get reached out to by recruiters because you're going to have an awesome LinkedIn after this workshop. So these things are good to ask about in conversations with recruiters if they are important to you. All right. Lastly, about us, Elevate is the name of our entry-level hiring program that I was mentioning before. So again, it's how we were founded, and now we just have a program in place based on that. So what that means for you all is once you actually get started with us, we provide technical training and professional development that you do alongside your 40-hour work week. It's usually like 1 or 2 hours a week, but it's just an additional support for you to grow in the organization and ultimately get converted on permanently and hopefully become a leader maybe one day. So my job as the program coordinator is to do things like this, meet you all proactively. I'd be happy to be like a resource for you, even if it's about positions not for BrookSource. And then once you get started, I hold everyone accountable for completing the training. So I think, so if you are interested in working with us after this workshop, the first step is to get in contact with your local program coordinator. So again, if you're in Chicago, that's me. And then you and I would probably do our first interview together. If we have a specific position we're talking about, I might give you some resume critiques, or if we're not talking about a position, I might still give you some resume critiques. And then from there, if we do have a position available that you're a good fit for, I would help prepare you for the interview with the actual company, which there's usually only one. And then I extend you the job offer and you start with us from there. So any questions about us before we actually get into the LinkedIn content? Okay, great. I'll put my contact information in the chat later. All right, let's get started. So I'm sure most of you on the call know why LinkedIn is important, but to me, there's like 3 main reasons. What are some of the main reasons that LinkedIn is important?
To connect with people.
Yes, connect building your network.
Apply to jobs.
Yes, applying to jobs. Yeah, obviously, a lot of people know you can apply to jobs on LinkedIn. You also can come up in relevant searches for people like me and other recruiters and companies. And it's just a great way to like build your brand in the industry and build your digital footprint. Just a couple of stats. So, over 169 million workers in the US have LinkedIn profiles. Over 20,000 companies in the US use LinkedIn to recruit other people. And over 3 million jobs are posted on LinkedIn in the US every month. I actually got this information from an article in 2020. So, it is still relevant. And I personally have actually increased my usage of LinkedIn to find candidates over the pandemic because I'm not able to meet you all at great networking events as much as we used to. So for me, it's my number one way to find candidates right now. And I have access to all the other job boards too. All right, cool. So wanted to point out real quick, at the end of 2020, I was in like a networking event virtually, and it was about LinkedIn. And they pointed out that there's this jobs tab, which I think was newer. It might have been like enhanced in 2020. And you can go to that tab and find interview prep and resume tips within LinkedIn, which I thought was really cool because I'm sure you all know about the job alerts and how to apply to jobs and how to find groups to get connected with. But I just thought it was awesome that there was interview prep and resume help there too. So again, just at the jobs tab on the top. Okay, so let's get into it from the basics. What do recruiters look for? What are like the main couple of things? Yes, work experience is one. What else?
Like a professional picture.
Yes, picture, major. Activity, that's actually a really good point. We will talk about that later too. Yeah, those are great answers. A couple others. This is ranked in my personal opinion, just on like what I look for. So picture is actually kind of important. It's kind of just a subconscious thing for us. In my mind, as I'm scrolling through hundreds of applications, it really just sticks out to me, and it shows that you actually put time into your profile and you are serious about looking. And it's just a great like digital first impression too. So that's number one for me. Number two, just in terms of how important it is for you to show up in a search and even on an application, is skills. And then from there, like Danya said, you know, your major, schooling, your experience. I don't know all of your backgrounds, but you might not have like relevant technical experience. So you might want to put projects on your LinkedIn. And then from there, your actual professional experience that's not even relevant to what you're looking for, just nice conversation starters and might show intangible skills. So let's start from the top, or actually, I'm going to do a couple comparisons first. So, what is the difference between the one profile and on the left, and then the profile on the right? Yep. Yeah. So details, projects on the left. You can kind of see I blocked this person's identity on the left, but they had a picture and they have a better title than just like senior looking or senior at whatever university. And then they actually have like media, which is technically what like uploading your projects is called. So it's just way more filled out. And on the right hand side here, obviously like you don't see anything about them, and it does hurt that person's searchability too. So same thing here. I won't have you all guess again, but main thing I wanted to point out here is on the right-hand side, the person's skills are great skills, but I know this person was looking for IT roles, data science roles, and those skills don't really speak that to me. So you can definitely have them, but we'll get into a second, like how many skill slots you have and how you can make sure the most relevant ones stand out at the top of the skills section. All right, cool. So I'm gonna go like from the top of a profile to the bottom. And again, throughout this whole thing, you can just kind of interject me and ask questions and maybe add in your own thoughts. So where is the headline? I'm sure you all know it's right underneath your picture. Why is it important? So again, I actually sat through a different seminar in 2020 about LinkedIn and actually found out that they changed their search algorithm, I think during 2020, and your headline actually does have more weight when it comes to where you come up in a search. So what I mean by that is if I search for a person with 1 to 3 years of experience with a data science master's degree and SQL and Python and Tableau as my top 3 skills. If you don't have Tableau, data science, SQL in your headline, again, it's right underneath your name, you'll show up later in the search, not as like the first person that comes up. So it just became important. So it's good to know. Obviously, you still want to do, what the last person had, like senior looking for full-time opportunities, but you want to add in those titles after that. So how do you do that? So you have 120 characters to work with, which is a ton. And it does look a little overwhelming, but again, it's all about coming up in searches, showing people what you're looking for and who you are. So I included some examples below. For all of you, if you are actively job searching, I would recommend having something about like open to opportunities, seeking opportunities in here. But then from there, you can just kind of use that vertical line to separate all of your keywords in your headline to make sure you are coming up. So how do you find out what keywords? Like if you're just getting into your job search, you're just starting building your LinkedIn, like where do you start? I would recommend just looking up some jobs that you're interested in and scrolling down to the bottom to the requirements and seeing what are some like major skills that most jobs are looking for and going from there. If you don't want to put seeking opportunities as your part of your headline, putting the job title you want or your last internship title also works. So what are all of your thoughts on this? Questions? All right, all good on headline? Cool. So what's next? Last thing about this. So again, if you don't want to put seeking opportunities, I tried to break it down into 3 different ways that you could title yourself. So the standard way is like the title that you want that I just mentioned, or your last internship title. University focus would be again like master's graduate seeking opportunities, or you could get creative, which is what I used to have on my profile, which is like, just a creative way to describe yourself. But again, it all comes down to the keywords and you want to make sure your profile comes up. Okay, next is the picture. So a lot of people skip their picture and it's totally your preference. But again, it does kind of help with just like personalizing yourself online, creating your brand. So I know DePaul used to have resources available to have people get their picture taken. But honestly, like iPhones are so great right now. Those also work and, have pretty great features of like blurring out the background. So I'm sure most of you know this, but try to dress professional. Don't wear anything that has like patterns or like too much color. Um, Make sure you either have a clean background or a blurred background, and then make sure to smile. And I would also recommend not having a selfie. It just kind of looks a little bit less professional, but with the pandemic, I feel like those things have changed just a little bit. The main point is just to have a picture. So if you don't already, I would recommend getting on that and trying to use DePaul's resources if they currently have them available. All right, so, oh, which picture would you choose here? Yes, the middle one. Great. Okay, so the next section underneath the headline is your about section. I feel like this is very commonly skipped over. As a recruiter, I'm sure you all have heard like we don't spend a ton of time looking at resumes and looking at profiles, but we still do look at mostly everything. And sometimes the about section actually does help me understand like, okay, would they even be interested in this opportunity that I'm reaching out to them about? Or are they trying to pivot into a different career and they just still came up in my search? So that helps a lot. But again, does increase searchability. And so if you really want to be one of the top people that show up in a search or even an application that you applied to, there's 400 other people that applied, you definitely should update your about section. So aside from that, it does also highlight your accomplishments and it gives us an idea of your personality just a little bit. So how do you do this? So you technically have 2,000 characters to use, which again, tons of opportunity here. So I included an example on the right. If you move our faces, just of like the format, I would recommend. So start off with what you do, what you're good at. Again, that's kind of like the personality piece. From there, try to include your contact information somewhere. Um, Within the first couple of paragraphs, try to answer the question, why should I hire you? Or what makes you different than other people? A couple ways to do that is listing your core competencies or your core skills, your main accomplishments, whether it's 3 or 2, doesn't matter to me. And then at the very end of your about section, have a call to action. So for those of you on the call that might not be looking actively for new roles right now, maybe specify when you will be looking if you're not graduating until 2022, or if you're just looking to network, like feel free to reach out to me if you're looking to network with data science professionals in Chicago. Whatever it might be, always have a call to action. And then again, if you're open to it, have your contact information there too. Any questions about the about section?
How long do you think it should be, like the about section? Like 2 paragraphs, 3?
Yeah, so I think 2 to 3 paragraphs, like to encompass the power statement, the why we should hire you, and then from there, and like your accomplishments, and then from there is the bullet pointed list of your key skills. That again increases searchability. It's another place for your skills to stand out. And then at the end, just like a quick one sentence for what a call to action should be.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right, next. So right underneath that is usually your work experience. So this mainly is for increasing searchability and for us to obviously see what you have done. Like I said at the beginning, your work experience does not need to be just relevant to what you're looking for. There's been plenty of times that I've moved forward with someone that was a manager at Subway because I knew that they would have the professional customer service experience that we were looking for a technical role. So still relevant or just a conversation starter. And there's no one-page rule this time because it's your LinkedIn and not your resume. So just include as much as you want in your work experience. And a few points here we'll talk about in the next slide, like the actual how-to, but I would recommend, if you have your resume filled out, just copying and pasting your bullet points from each position into your LinkedIn, which will help you make sure like your resume is pretty consistent with your LinkedIn too. And then if any of you have had an internship that you weren't really given a specific title, it is totally fair game to make a title sound more relevant to what you actually did and what you might be looking for, like data science intern or data analyst intern. Sometimes I do search intern in my searches, like I'll put SQL, Python, R, Tableau, and intern because a lot of the times, like I need people who have had at least one internship. And sometimes the years of experience in my search, like recruiter LinkedIn, doesn't pull that. It just pulls people who've like had other experiences. So those are things to think about in terms of keywords to include when you're writing in your work experience. And then as long as you fill in the dates correctly on LinkedIn, it'll automatically put it in reverse chronological order. And then the last thing I'll add here is if any of you are currently working on a project at DePaul that is like working with a client or maybe even a fake client, sometimes people put those in the work experience, even if it's a project, because it gives you that like real world experience. So if you do that, we can talk offline on how to be creative with that, but you'd put like DePaul as the company, probably, and then whatever title you'd give yourself, like some sort of like project leader or data science project or something. So we can talk about that if you have questions. So I'm sure most of you have probably done this before on your LinkedIn, but just in case, you should always use the drop down for the companies you've worked at if you can. Why is this? So for me, sometimes I do specifically look for folks who have worked at some companies because I know that company has a tech stack that we're really looking for. So it just helps me narrow down my search. And then also, as I'm about to get on the phone with someone for our first interview, I might click on the company to find out more about like where they worked before the call. So just makes it easier for everyone. And then again, from there, specify what your job title was. Don't just put intern. Make sure to use keywords throughout. So if I were to like control F your LinkedIn profile for some skills that I was looking for, I would hope that it would show up in all of your bullet points and all of your experience that is actually relevant. And make sure to keep your dates up to date as much as possible. So if you finish that position in August of 2020, make sure that's updated, because it could depend on, you know, if someone reaches out to you or not. For me, like if you're still attending school and you've actually graduated, I might not reach out to you because I might think, oh, they're not going to be interested if they're still in school. So just make sure that kind of stuff is up to date. Any questions about work experience?
Not directly related to work experience, but you sort of mentioned people who are changing careers. Do you have any general advice for people who are transitioning into the data science field and how to build a LinkedIn profile where most of my experience is not related to that?
Yeah, I do. So first, the like tailoring your headline and your about section, like we just talked about, with as many keywords. And then kind of like I just mentioned, actually, if you have a project that you've been working on, it's fair game usually to include that as a position. You could just put like data science student as your title, DePaul as the company, and a couple bullet points about this project. And then in a little bit, we'll get into like where to actually put your projects too. But I think it's just all about the keywords. In your about section, you can word it in a way that makes it clear you're making a transition, and even include some of the job titles that you might be looking for too, because that's another thing that I include in searches. So it would only help if you put that in your profile.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Another question. If someone is graduating within a month, should they be putting their status as ready to work, or should they wait until the graduation is official? I would say putting your status as seeking opportunities May 2021 would be fair. It's a good question though, because I have a couple positions right now that we're willing to wait until graduation. So if your graduation's in June, I would say it would be more fair to put June 2021 just in case. But if you're graduating in May, ready to work is fair, because the interview process usually takes a couple weeks anyways, depending on the company. That actually brings up a good point, just a little off topic, but if you are getting reached out to by recruiters for immediate positions, the worst thing you could do is just ignore them, or not engage, because it's very, very likely they'll have another position available when you are ready. And so just because you're still in school or you haven't graduated yet, it doesn't mean it's not a great opportunity to network with someone in the field. Okay, great. Cool. So next is usually the education section. So obviously you want to include the name of your school and make sure it's in the drop down. I sometimes do look for DePaul students, so that would be helpful. And then make sure that all of your degrees are included and the expected graduation date. So if you just have it currently attending, it might make sense to put in the description that what your expected graduation date is, just because similar to the last question, it saves time. I might not reach out at that time then. I might wait until the next opportunity we have. Or if I do reach out, at least I know going into the call, when you're graduating. Make sure to include your minors. And then similar to that example, I think it was the second example that I showed on the left-hand side, they had all of their activities that they were a part of, and then a description of what they did in that activity. I think that's great. I think it's a great conversation starter. It makes you super interesting to talk to, and that might even pull some keywords too. So I would recommend using the description in your education section. All right, volunteer experience. So this is, again, one of those things, contrary to your resume, you have all of the space in the world to include, and I think it makes you interesting. So it's not necessarily going to pull as a keyword search, but actually, for example, I do have a current opening that's not relevant to data, but it's a software engineer opening with one of my clients who really, really values extra lab work or mathematics competitions, and any volunteer experience in life science in the life sciences industry. So that's kind of relevant, and just something that you wouldn't even think about as a candidate that an employer would be looking for, because it's a computer science role technically. But then outside of that, it's really fun to just, see what people are interested in. It might help me understand if you're going to enjoy the environment of our client, depending on what their mission statements are and what they do to give back to the community too. So if you have volunteer experience, great. If you don't, that's also totally fine. Okay, so the skills section. Most of you probably know it's all the way down at the bottom of the profile. So of course, it's not the first thing we see when we get to your profile, but two reasons that I think it's really important. This is the number one way to be searchable. I know I've said that. I feel like I sound like the boy who cried wolf, but this is the actual number one way to show up in a search. So that's of course like the main reason to have relevant skills in your section. But another reason is actually like when I get on the phone with someone or I have an interview with them, I'll scroll down to their profile right before the call and just make sure I understand like, okay, they do have these skills we're looking for. Oh, wow, they actually also have this plus that I didn't know they had. And that's not why they showed up in my search. So I'm going to ask about that too. So it's just a great way to showcase your skills, obviously. So technically you have 50 skills that you're allowed to put on your profile. I would highly recommend going back to all of your past classes you've taken in your program so far and just like trying to think of all these like random tools and technologies that you might not have even thought about as useful or something that people would be looking for. And just kind of making a word bank for yourself and then putting them in your profile. From there, I think maybe go through some job descriptions, like we said before, and put in skills that you've worked with. And then the main way to make sure your skills actually stand out on your profile is getting the endorsements from folks in the field. And that could be your peers from your classes too, or your professors, or anyone you've worked with like on a project in your personal time or academically. But getting an endorsement just makes them like show up higher in the section too. And then making sure that your actual skills that are relevant are like moved. You can actually move your top skills to be the top ones that show up in the section. So just make sure to do that. So one of the main ways outside of like putting all 50 skills on your profile, which we'll talk about in a second, is showing that you're open to work. This is kind of an outdated picture, but let's say we did a search for a software engineer in Pennsylvania. There's a whole different section for me as a recruiter to look for candidates that are open to work. So sometimes I don't even go to the full list of candidates because it's much more efficient for me to go reach out to the however many candidates that are open to work for this search first, and then I very much might find the right candidate through that. So it just increases your chances of getting pulled. But the way to show up as this person who's number one is to have these skills and these keywords. What is, do all or most of the positions require a degree? Just curious if you are in school, but also looking. Actually, that's a great question. So not all of our positions require the degree. It's usually like a huge plus if you're pursuing it and we know you're going to graduate like within the next year or so, and you're learning relevant skills to the position. So I've hired a ton of people that are still finishing their degree, actually specifically in the data science program at DePaul. So is endorsement important? Yes, I think they are important, because I think that's how most of your skills like show up on your profile higher than they would, because you can only move around certain like so many. So it just kind of increases the chances of your top skills showing up higher in your profile. Is it okay to have endorsement from your CEO who is not in the data science field? Yeah, I think so. I think that's great. It sounds like a really impactful person. So that's great. All right. Okay, so I wanted to focus on like your technical skills and your soft skills. So I'm sure most of you, and like clearly there's a couple career changers here that have tons of soft skills and maybe some like not industry related skills. I would recommend starting with the relevant ones first, starting with the relevant technical skills. And again, think back to all of your coursework. if it takes going through syllabus or some of the syllabus from your past classes, go for it. Go through all of your past projects, personally, academically, like how did you get into this data science program at DePaul? Were you working on something prior to this that you forgot about? So think back to all of that and start there with the skills. And then, of course, like any work experience that you have or personal hobbies. And then from there, a little bit of overlap here, but of course, your soft skills do matter. There has been plenty of times that I've actually put in like public speaking or leadership in the search because I know that's something that's going to be like really relevant in the position, even if it's not like on the job description. So it is worth having soft skills, but I would recommend starting with relevant technical skills first and filling up as many of the 50 slots as you can. Okay, cool. So once you have your profile built, let's say it's absolutely perfect, then I would start making it more perfect. So uploading any media, whether that's your actual resume or project experience or like a project example. And then from there, I would definitely recommend asking for at least one recommendation before you even graduate. And that could be from a professor you had or someone at DePaul or someone like a client that you worked for on a project at DePaul. It just is a really nice added bonus for me on the other side of things when I'm looking through hundreds of profiles and trying to decide like who, you know, is actually a good fit for the company, or even if we've had an interview with you and I'm trying to decide who to move forward with for the next interview, these little things do make a difference. So while you're in school, it's just, I feel like maybe easier to get that recommendation on your profile since you do have so many resources at DePaul. And then from there, I would recommend actually engaging. So someone at the beginning asked about like or said activity is something we look for. That's always like a really nice to have for me when I get to your profile and I've seen you've been like commenting on things and liking things or making your own posts. That's awesome. I think it shows like your personality, your professionalism. So to start, I would say just like follow some companies that you're really interested in. Join some job search groups. Definitely join the DePaul alumni group. And then from there, like try to find other folks that have something in common with you to start engaging with. I follow a couple like LinkedIn influencers on LinkedIn as well. And this person on the right, if you move our faces, seemed very passionate about getting too many messages that were not tailored to him at all. It sounds like he was just kind of getting, which I get kind of a lot too, of just like, hi, I want to pick your brain or I want to network. And it means not much to me. And it's not very easy for me to respond to those when I have hundreds of other messages from candidates who actually took time to tell me about what they want, how much of my time they want, like what the outcome of the conversation would be, so that I can actually, make time and be more impactful for them and add more value to the conversation. So if you are going to like blindly start messaging people on LinkedIn, which again, I encourage virtual coffees, just make sure to do it in a tailored fashion and have something specific that you're reaching out to them about, and maybe even mention what you all have in common. Okay, cool. So next, once your profile is perfect, then it's time to make sure your LinkedIn URL is perfect so that you can put it on your resume. So you most likely won't need a printed resume in a while, but you will hopefully maybe one day. So a tailored URL does help with that. And then if you're ever in a virtual networking event, such as this, you can just copy and paste your personalized URL and it's not super long and annoying. So I'm sure most of you know how to do this, but just in case, go to your profile, edit your contact information, and then just from there, make sure that you're like obviously in the right space and edit your URL. I would just recommend making it your first and last name just for sake of people finding you. And I guess this is a great time to bring up, like, when I'm on someone's resume, if I've met you before, I'm trying to remember like how we've met or and trying to remember you. I might just click on your LinkedIn before I reach back out about an open opportunity. I know some recruiters or companies do look at the LinkedIn first, even if they have access to your resume. So having the link on your profile definitely helps. Okay, so kind of covered some of this already, but want to just point out like a couple do's and don'ts of how to interact with companies and recruiters. So number one, I already talked about this, but open to opportunities or open to work is a function that you would put in your settings to make you more searchable and make you stand out when we do search for people. So the way to do this is just going to your settings. I think it's the job seeking preferences, and then it's called let recruiters know your open opportunities. So I guess main warning here, if you are not actively open to opportunities, I would recommend maybe not putting this on your settings because it definitely will increase your chances of getting reached out to. And if you don't have the time to engage with tons of messages, it might get overwhelming. But if you are ready, or when you are ready, I would definitely recommend doing this because, again, it's a totally different pool of candidates for me and other companies. And so you might not even get reached out to about a position that you very well are qualified for and interested in, probably, if you don't have this on. All right, so next thing, there's some, I guess, pros and cons to messages. They could definitely get annoying for you as a candidate, but they also could be super beneficial, and LinkedIn makes it really, really easy to interact with us over InMails. So InMail is just the name of the messages on LinkedIn. And I like to think of it, there's 3 ways you can interact with us. So number one, you could just accept our message, and then from there, you can tell us why you are interested or why you are not. That lets you like reply to us and lets me reply to you. Declining the message tells me you're not interested in the position, but I cannot reply back to you when you decline the message, which is fine, but it's really good to decline the message or accept the message. Like, I would recommend one or the other because I won't reach out about the same position again. I might put in our applicant tracking system, they're not interested in this position for some reason. So declining the message is great too. And then the worst thing you can do, I think, is ignoring the message. So just letting it sit in your inbox, because I very well might reach out about the same type of position again. Someone else in my company might reach out about the same position again. Or we might not reach out to you ever again because you're not very active on LinkedIn. So I think ignoring the message is probably the worst, just because also I can't reply to the same thread. I would have to start a whole new one. And so accepting or declining, getting in the habit of that is best practices for recruiters and for companies. The open opportunities also does help us because it includes your contact information. So once you are like actively looking, we're more likely to like reach out over email, or if we don't hear from you on InMail, that might be like our second way of going about it. If you decline, what message does the recruiter, someone you're not connected with, see on their end? It just says that you decline the message, and again, I would much prefer that than ignoring the message, just so we know what you're not interested in. It's a good question though. Maybe I'll include that in future workshops. Would you value a professor recommendation or an internship supervisor recommendation more? I think they're actually equal. Yeah, I think they're equal because if a professor is giving you a recommendation, you clearly went above and beyond in the class. You know, they probably don't do that for everyone. And then the internship supervisor works directly with you, so it just shows a little bit more about your like real world experience. So sorry, I don't mean to give you the cop out answer, but I think they're both pretty great. All right, great. Last thing just to keep in mind, I know most of you are getting your master's right now, but you'd be surprised, you know, how much people don't pay attention to their messages. And just remember, like, your initial interactions with us are your first impression. So try to make the best of it. So just make sure like you're always using proper grammar and you're mirroring the message that we're using. So if I come at you with like a really professional message, it probably makes sense to mirror what I did. So if I included an intro and a sign off, maybe you should do that too. And then if I stop using the intros, you can just stop as well. Response time is pretty important for recruiting in general, whether it's staffing or not. If I'm reaching out to you about a specific position, it's pretty likely we're going to fill it within the next week or two. So if you don't respond right away, you probably will miss out. Not to put any pressure on like responding to every single message every day, but just know that so that when you do go see it a month later, you know that going into the conversation and you can tailor your message to, I completely understand if this position's no longer available, but I would love to connect with you in the future if you ever want to have a proactive phone call. I am actively seeking opportunities now. Thanks again for reaching out. I love having proactive conversations. I think it's a great way for me to actually get to know you without just talking about a position the whole time. So main point here is like, if you see a message that sounds interesting, I would recommend probably replying right away. But if you don't see it in a long time, I would still reply and just like try to build that relationship from there. Okay, so wanted to point out here that like we all use application tracking systems. Most bigger companies have an automated filter that makes your profile like not get to a human sometimes, depending on how searchable your profile is. And sometimes if you do the easy apply button on LinkedIn, it'll like automatically download your profile into an application tracking system. And if it's not fully built out, you might not get through the system. And then with your resume, I just thought I'd bring this up since we're talking about ATSs. Same thing with your resume. If you use like a weird format that's not PDF or Word, or if your profile is like not fully built out on your resume, you might not get through to a human being. So just keep application tracking systems in mind. All right, so real quick, I did want to let you all know about a couple openings we have. So both of them are actually data engineer openings. I understand a lot of you might be looking for like data science roles. I would still love to talk to you, whether it's about these or future openings, because the one in Oak Brook, that's the first one listed here, is very likely going to turn into a data scientist in the near future, like 3 years from now. So that could be a great opportunity to get into it. And then the second one is with a consumer packaged goods company downtown, and it's much, much more like maintaining and building data pipelines in using Google Cloud Platform specifically, but you don't need experience with that. We just are looking for anyone with cloud technology experience. And then even Scala and Spark are like nice to have. So if you are interested in either of these or any future opportunities, I would love to connect with you. All right, any questions?
Sammy, I have a question. Does it matter, like, should people put their GPAs on their LinkedIn profile? Like, does that help, or does that seem like, I don't know?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my rule of thumb is if you have a 3.8 or above, it's worth putting on there because it's like a bonus. If you don't, it's fine. It's just like we don't even ask for them usually, so it's not worth putting on there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know what about a resume with two columns, like left side and the right side. Does that works with ATS?
That's a good question. So it will pass the ATS, but when it comes out on the other side, I guess it just, I don't know, it depends on the company probably whether it shows up as normal. Like for example, if you download a resume like that to Indeed or to Glassdoor, and I download it on my end as a recruiter, sometimes it just like shows up as jumbled, like the words are not in the right sections. So I think it depends on the company. So I would recommend having like a plain Jane resume ready, depending on where you're applying to.
Okay, then what about like 2 pages of resume? Like I only have like 1 page resume right now. So do I need to consider transform my like 2 columns resume to like 2 pages resume instead?
Yeah, I would recommend one for every 10 years of experience. So use your best judgment there, but that's usually what my team's rule of thumb is. I'd be happy to work with you on your resume too.
Thank you so much.
All right, great. I'm going to include my contact info here, just so you all have it moving forward. But thank you all so much for having me. I'm really excited to get to know you all. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sammy. If anybody has any additional questions that you weren't able to answer, reach out to me or the committee board, and I will be sharing. I know Sammy just sent it over, but I'll be sending over an email after this. And I'll send all of her information, and then I'll send the recording of this session next week. But it seems like people had resume questions. So if you guys are interested in a resume workshop for next quarter, let me know, or other things that you might be interested. I saw in the Google Doc that some of you are looking for internships. So if you are looking for like tailored workshops, just let us know, and then we can coordinate that with Sammy as well. But thank you so much for this event. It was really great to learn more about LinkedIn because I know I used it a lot for myself. And so it was really great to see like the different features that LinkedIn is having and the changes in those algorithms, because with everything going virtual, it's really important to know how to put yourself out there. But if nobody else has any questions, then I hope you guys have a great weekend. And it was really great seeing you guys again.